Welcome to Our Girl Relationships. On this channel, we discuss day-to-day problems people face in their lives. Let's start with the video. My parents and I's financial state has been in the same dilemma for as long as I can remember. They were always absent, claiming to be at work or occupied, trying to create some sort of financial stability for me. Growing up, I really believed that that's what they were doing. As I matured and became an adult, I was coming to the realization that they had been lying to me all along. The more I noticed how much money they made and how much we spent, the more I became aware of the fact that there was something amidst their spendings that's taking up the financial stability and comfort I was deprived of. I couldn't tell you what it is now because it is something that could speak negatively of my parents if the entire situation isn't read properly. Nevertheless, I grew up to become less appreciative of their constant absence, which they claimed was for my own good, but was actually for the sake of their entertainment. I also grew impatient and concerned about the point in life in which I get the chance to allow my efforts to define the quality of my life. I knew that following high school, I would have to start taking control over things and make my own dreams come true. One of the many dreams I grew up fantasizing about was flying out to another country and studying and making a good life for myself, and even getting married eventually. To me, it wasn't just the fact that I would get a degree or go abroad. It was that I would get the opportunity to start everything from scratch and have things actually be defined by my efforts and the hard work that I put in, instead of the lies my parents raised me on and the terrible community I grew up in. There was always a rooted fear within me that I wouldn't be able to make it, and it grew within me the more I realized just how difficult the process of transferring one's life to another country is. I never lost hope nor stopped working to make the money I used to give myself that push. I'm still very proud of myself for sticking to my dreams and seeing them through to the end. I can also acknowledge the fact that I probably wouldn't have been able to achieve them had my parents not been a helpful factor in me going abroad. When I informed them that I would be studying in Europe for the following 6 years or so, I guess they were struck with the realization that they didn't prepare anything to back up my plans or help me enter adulthood. At the time, the only thing they could offer me was take out a single annual mortgage on the house and lend it to me while I get a degree, and then they were trying to pay it off, or I could do so once my studies were over. It was very evident that they would never actually try to pay it off and would hold off on it until I'm able to pay it myself. But it was basically the most essential factor in me getting the life of my dreams. It's been 6.5 years since that happened, and I returned home a couple months ago for the first time. Only I didn't come back by myself because while I was in Europe getting proper education, I met the man I believe to be the love of my life and the person I wish to continue my life with. I say that with such conviction for many reasons, one of them being, with my residency over in his country, he agreed to fly back home with me and see where things go, and even try to apply for nationality eventually, just so he could be near me. My parents allowed us the peace of mind for the first few days before things started going down the drain. They asked me to go with them to the bank so I could pay off the mortgage I had taken all of those years ago, because they were in need of money, and having debts with my country's governmental banks is never a good idea. It could easily lead you in jail for decades. Oh, and honestly, going back to the bank and interacting with the government workers and everything made me realize just how much of a drastic drop in life quality I would be experiencing should I stay there. Once I was shown the amount of money I was supposed to be paying, I realized that my parents had cornered me into a bit of a snackery manipulative situation. The money that I was requested to pay off was more than 10 times the money I had taken to fund my studies. If I had to guess, they probably took out yearly mortgages at least a dozen times after the one I used to fly out. I still paid it off because I was aware of the fact that if I paid off all of it at once, then the government would grant me ownership over the house and legally list it as one of my properties. What I then believed to be an investment turned out to be one of the worst decisions I've made in my life. My parents' home was in an absolutely terrible condition, which obviously means that the mortgage money they had taken throughout the years wasn't spent renovating the house. It was spent possibly sponsoring their horrific self-control and money management habits. I still had plans of taking up some of the money I had saved up for my living and using it to renovate the home because I really didn't want to make my boyfriend, who is used to living very comfortably, suffer through the terrible conditions that my childhood home was in. I was willing to look past all of this if my parents hadn't once again cornered me when we got home and flat out asked me to kick out my boyfriend and send him back home because they didn't want a stranger living in their home, and said they didn't want me spending my money on him and instead focusing my efforts on paying them back for bringing me into the world and raising me to become the person that I am today. I was disgusted by their greediness and how they only saw me as a tool that could pay off their debts and feed their incompetency. To a certain extent, I'm grateful they started feeling the entitlement to use me and take advantage of me immediately as I got home, because had I gotten settled down and renovated the home and stabilized my stay in the country, I don't think it would have been as easy to repair the aftermath of this incident. As soon as they asked me to kick out the man who literally agreed to flip his whole world upside down so he could be with me, I finalized ownership over the house, then packed all of my stuff and my man and yeeted myself out of the country and back to Europe immediately. I took the step that my boyfriend and I had been avoiding, which was to get legally married so I could have a European passport and a permanent residency, not even a nationality. I try not to think about how they're doing or whether they were able to provide for themselves or not, because they're adults and they're the ones supposed to be responsible for me, not the other way around. I still can't help but feel guilty for not offering them the help that I want to be offering them. The only reason that is because I know they will get used to my solution offering presents, and they will be addicted to having me as a source of income instead of being comforted by the presence of their daughter in their life. It makes so much sense that you wouldn't hesitate to get out of your parents' household and back in a place where you had no contact with them. They seem to be horrible people before they are horrible parents, and the combination of two is really detrimental, and a person with your ambitions and goals in life. I agree that if you stick around them and let them influence you long enough, they're going to start leeching off of your dreams, and eventually you're going to be left with nothing and a miserable boyfriend. Not the a-hole. Your parents are terrible at giving love or interacting with it. Not sure if it's because you have different origins and your culture is different, but the perception of love seems to be very superficial and transactional. It shows in the way that they still rejected your boyfriend even though he showed how much he loved you by moving countries for you. Your parents assuming you would drop him so easily speaks more of what they would do in a similar situation, even for you possibly. Not the a-hole. I would assume that staying in your country with those kinds of people is the perfect recipe to throw away everything you've spent your life building up. Go back to Europe or whichever country you were and stay there for as long as you can. If you want to support them and help them out financially, then make sure it's not large enough for them to rely on you, and stay in contact with them for the sake of relieving your own conscience. Other than that, these are the exact people you want to minimize contact with. It doesn't matter if they're family or not. They clearly don't consider you family in the secret sense that they're asking you to consider them, or else they wouldn't have taken advantage of your financial state so evidently, even when they know that you're struggling financially at your young age. Next story. First off, I'm bad at storytelling, so if something is not clear, feel free to ask. I, 29 female, am from Europe but have lived in South Korea since I was 19. Currently, I live together with my boyfriend in a nice spacious house. While I was still in college, a close friend of mine, let's call her Rebecca, from my home country visited me in Korea. She stayed at my place for free but paid for everything else: food, airfare, transportation, etc. A few months before the pandemic, I invited another friend of mine, I will call her Irene, from my country, to visit me and stay at my house. My boyfriend was on a month-long business trip overseas. Since I invited her, I offered to pay for her plane ticket. Irene and Rebecca are close friends. When I went to the airport to pick up Irene, I was shocked to see Rebecca and her fiancé, who I have never met before, there as well. Turns out they came along and assumed they would stay at my place during their trip to Korea because they knew I had enough room. I refused to let them stay as they were not invited, and I didn't feel comfortable with having a strange man in my house while my boyfriend was away. We argued, but long story short, they had to book a hotel, and since they were on a budget, they couldn't enjoy their trip fully due to the unexpected expense on accommodation. After that, I went no contact with Rebecca and honestly never considered posting the story here, but recently she got married and Irene was invited to the wedding. A few days ago, I was talking to Irene and she started to tell me about the wedding and that if I had apologized for ruining Rebecca's vacation back then I could have been a part of it too. Apparently, Rebecca was willing to forgive me if I apologized. I don't think I did anything wrong and I don't see why I should apologize, but Reddit, let me know if I'm the a-hole. Not the a-hole. They show up unannounced, expecting to stay when she could have easily contacted you and asked. She did that on purpose. She tried to ambush you and hoped you would get guilted into saying yes. It's perfectly acceptable to refuse housing a strange man, especially given your boyfriend was absent. Lastly, my question is, why didn't Irene drop you a hint or alert you to the fact that Irene and her boyfriend were coming? That makes it seem like she was in on it and actively assisted them in ambushing you. You have strange friends. Not the a-hole. You are not in the wrong. You have a right to refuse anyone staying in your home. It takes a lot to invite yourself to stay at someone's house, demand an apology to be invited to their wedding, all because you refused her freeloading mooching ace. Rebecca and her man, they're the ones that need to apologize to you. Let Rebecca know she can keep her forgiveness. It's not needed after you said no. This was and is your boundary, and Rebecca's entitlement got mad due to her not being able to force you to do something you did not want to do. Good for you for standing your ground. I refused to let them stay as they were not invited, and I didn't feel comfortable with having a strange man in my house while my boyfriend was away. We argued. I would have never argued with someone after I said no. Not the a-hole. It's weird that neither Rebecca nor Irene informed you that Rebecca was going to Korea too and wanted to stay with you, especially if you're already friends with Rebecca. Didn't she at least drop you a text or something before appearing in front of you? It is weirder that Irene brought this up after 2 years saying that Rebecca is waiting for an apology. Does Irene see anything wrong about Rebecca, or is there some communication breakdown on Irene's part? Did you find out how Rebecca got herself invited to your place? Was it her idea or Irene's? Next story. I was doing some grocery shopping with my 2 kids, 3 and 4.5 today. Usually we all shop together, but my husband was at work all day and I wanted to get to the digital deals and week at sales the first day of the store week while they were still well stocked. Kroger's, fries. Something doesn't scan right in the self-checkout, so an attendant comes to help. She first gives my kids some stickers, which they were super thankful for. Then she begins to see what the problem was. She stops and smiles comfortingly at me. Shopping can be hard as a single mom, can it? I was taken aback as we usually shop as a family with my husband, and I never receive questions like this. I laughed uncomfortably and said, "Oh no, I'm not a single mother," and showed her my rings. My husband crafted a beautiful engagement ring for me with diamonds his father gifted him when he was younger. We had a very small courthouse wedding where he gave me a small diamond wedding band. Together, they're very beautiful and I treasure them. But as soon as I showed the attendant, she made an awful offended face and said, "Okay, wow, you're the winner for most disrespectful shopper today." And she literally left. I was like, what? So I pressed request attendant on the checkout touch screen, and a young man came to help me. He asked me why his supervisor left in such a hurry. I told him she asked if I was a single mother, and I said no and showed her my wedding ring. He laughed and said that's ridiculous. I agreed. I saw her talking to other employees as I was walking out of the store and heard one of them say witch while looking my way. I then felt very bad about the whole thing. So am I the a-hole for showing someone my wedding ring when they assumed I was a single mother? Not the a-hole. Wow. You should report her to management. Her behavior is shocking. Firstly, why on earth would she assume you're single? I'm a dad and sometimes we all shop together. Sometimes just my wife and kids. Sometimes just me and the kids. Secondly, her reaction makes no sense. What you did is in no way disrespectful. Not the a-hole. Her assumption was strange to say the least. Since when are single moms the only ones who shop with their kids? You're not rude for simply correcting her, and when there is a misunderstanding, it's normal to use some proper signal to help clarify what you're saying. Example, when a neighbor thought our news was that we were getting a dog, I touched my belly when saying, "No, a baby." I wouldn't have done that if I was just saying I was pregnant. What you did was normal. Her behavior was not, and I can't understand why she would be so offended. Not the a-hole. You did absolutely nothing wrong. She made the inappropriate comment about you being a single mother, and then you showed her your ring. What would she expect? You lean your head to one side with a sad expression. You did what a normal person would do, show her the ring. I would do the same. Maybe she was jealous of the beautiful ring. Who knows? Or maybe she just isn't a nice person at all. Next story. I 17 female, my half-siblings 4 and 5, my older brother 19, my mom and her boyfriend Ted. My mom and Ted started dating around 6 months ago. I normally wake my siblings up to get them ready for school. I drop them off when I go to school. I pick them up and watch them until my mom comes home, and I often watch them at night when my mom and Ted go out. My mom approached me a week ago and told me that Ted was moving in with us. They were expecting me to help take care of his daughter when she was staying there. Moving day. Ted's daughter wanted my room. I was kind but showed her to the room my mom set up for her. Later on, Ted moved my things, breaking a music box my grandma left me when she died, along with several other things. When I approached my mom about it, her reply was, "We all need to make sacrifices." I was changing my clothes and Ted just barged into my room without knocking. His daughter wanted something else of mine. I told my mom I felt really uncomfortable about it. She just blew it off. Finally, it got to a point I called my dad. He came over and we packed my stuff. My cell phone and Jeep were given to me by my dad. My older brother came and watched my siblings until Ted and my mom came home. My mom was mad. She called me and told me my dad had changed the number. Then she called my dad and asked him when I was coming home. He replied, "She's already home." My grandma called my dad and told him I was an A for not giving my mom more time to work things out and leaving her with no childcare and no way to get the kids back and forth to school. Am I the a-hole here? Should I have given her more time? Not the a-hole. Your mother shouldn't have taken advantage of you. Your room and your stuff should be sacrosanct, not given away to other kids without permission to placate her new boyfriend. A grown man has no business barging in, and if he didn't know it, your mom should have stood up for you. They caused this, not you. Not the a-hole. You're 17. You're a young adult. However, you're not responsible for providing childcare services for your mother. I'm sure you love your half-siblings and didn't mind helping out, but your mother upended your life, moving her boyfriend and his daughter into your home. Your mother's expectations were unreasonable. You are a child and should not be expected to parent your younger siblings, and in your case, her boyfriend's daughter. Your father put your mother and by extension your grandmother in their place. Don't feel guilty or bad and don't second guess yourself.